Please listen carefully.
Welcome to the newest episode of the Extra Buttery Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Chen in Vancouver, and I'll be joined by my co-host, Robert Snell. We've got some quick news hits to go through, including Disney pulling out of Netflix. We're going to talk about James Cameron and his new Avatar franchise. We're going to talk about Ben Affleck and the Justice League movies. And then we'll touch on Game of Thrones and a couple other upcoming movies, including Miyazaki's BORO the Caterpillar and Steven Soderbergh's Logan Lucky. So without further ado, joining me from Toronto is my co-host Robert Snell. How's it going?
It's going pretty good. How about you?
Not bad.
All right. But yeah, let's talk about this Disney thing to start, because this is like one of the news writers who was reporting on this story initially put it really well when he said that it's both a surprise but also not a surprise, because we're kind of in this era now where every single major media corporation wants to have their own special platform with a monthly subscription plan and direct access to revenue. And so, you know, Disney is essentially saying, all right, we're going to, in 2019, we're going to fire up this new platform. They haven't announced any kind of details about cost or the countries it's going to be available in when it launches. But yeah, it's kind of, you know, it's not a huge surprise, but I guess maybe for people who've gotten used to having Disney stuff readily available on Netflix, it might be a bit of a disappointment. I mean, well, where's your head at on the whole thing?
Well, it's not surprising because I think a lot of companies see Netflix and their stock price and then go, hey, why aren't we doing this? Why are we letting Netflix make money for us when we can make money by ourselves? I think we talked about this too, is that if everyone starts up their own streaming service, we're kind of back at square one where everyone picks their own cable package essentially. And I can't tell you how annoying it is because I lose track of what things or what services that I subscribe to sometimes.
So you're like, you're getting a bit of sticker shock when you check your credit card bill now. It's like, oh, wait. Oh.
Yeah, because they do these deals where they're like, hey, sign up for 1 month free and then we'll charge your credit card afterwards. I'm like, oh, okay, all right. And then sometimes, like, once in a while, I'll forget. I never got into Show Me or Hulu because they just, like, there were titles that never really kind of caught my attention.
Yeah, and their Canadian rollout wasn't very good.
No, and it was totally like a backlash against Canadian telecom companies because I honestly don't think they treat their customers very well.
Yeah.
I have Amazon Prime, and like usually I just order stuff from Amazon. Like Amazon Prime Video is like something that I kind of think about after I think about Netflix.
Right. Yeah.
And for Disney, like they got to be careful here because they can't charge through the nose. I know Disney loves making money, but they got to keep it pretty reasonable because they don't have the same library as Netflix, even though they have like the Disney Vault.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, arguably I think where a lot of the draw for this product is going to come from is with kids and families, where you know, Disney has obviously been running the Disney Channel, which has been available on TV packages for probably, 20 years or more now. And
more than that, I think.
And, you know, that has always been stocked with like hundreds of episodes of proprietary TV shows with all kinds of like child and teen stars. And like, I think most mainstream moviegoers probably don't watch a lot of that stuff. So
not to mention the direct-to-video sequels like Lion King 2.5 or whatever that was.
Yeah. So there's probably a lot of stuff, but yeah, it's still, I think you're still right in pointing out that they have nowhere near the library of Netflix. And the other tricky part of this whole transaction is going to be what kind of impact does it have on the other global versions of Netflix, including us here in Canada, because I've heard a few outlets reporting that Netflix Canada may actually retain the Disney content where the American Netflix won't.
Yeah.
Because Disney will have an easier time launching an American Disney streaming platform, like a standalone one, because they obviously have all the rights to the American distribution of that stuff. But in Canada, the rights situation is different. So we may actually find a weird situation where like the Disney stuff is not available on American Netflix, but it is available in Canada. And And then in the meantime, there's like the whole like Star Wars Marvel thing.
Yeah, well, Netflix is a trailblazer in that sense, right? Like, look how long it took them to get their stuff in China, right?
Yeah.
So maybe
Yeah.
Disney will have a little easier time because they're a bigger company and they have more clout.
There is some potential here, though. One thing that I think they'll have to start thinking about will be original content in the way that Netflix does.
Yeah.
And there would be no better way to launch that than to have a live-action Star Wars show available on day one when the service launches. And if that's the case, that could draw in a lot of traffic, but it would have to be like ready to go.
Yeah, well, it's going to be hard, right? Because they got the Han Solo movie coming up next year.
Yeah.
So they're probably focusing on that. Like I said, the direct-to-video stuff will probably be there for Disney, and then the TV shows you talked about.
The other weird little detail is the Marvel Defenders universe. So like Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and then Defenders itself. That's actually going to stay on Netflix as a Netflix original.
Yeah, because that's Netflix property.
Yeah, so it's kind of a weird, some people are kind of being a bit hasty and they're saying like, Disney's pulling out of Netflix entirely, but, as we've seen, it's not really quite that cut and dried.
I'm also one of those, like, probably rare people now that buy home video.
Oh, yeah.
So it doesn't really affect me that much. So if Disney's like, we're going to pull out, we're going to have all the Star Wars and Marvel stuff on our own streaming service, I'll just be like, well, I'm not going to watch all those movies anyway, so I'm just going to go out and buy the Blu-rays of movies I like.
Yeah.
And I mean, Disney's still going to make money off it, but at the same time, I don't have to pay for something that I only watch 1/10 of, which is the problem with cable packages.
Exactly.
Right? Like you get 100 channels, you only watch like 5 of them because the rest are junk.
Now, maybe this development isn't really kind of the death knell of the cord cutting thing. Like it might initially seem. Like I know every couple of weeks now it seems like there's a new service coming along that's saying like, hey, subscribe to us as well. And then collectively we all grown a little bit and we're like, oh no, we don't want to go back to spending $200 a month. I think people will kind of reach a ceiling where they're like, no, I'm not going to go back to cable package expenditures.
Right. Well, some people, I think I was reading an article today talking about how cord cutters have, like, it's still going up, the number of cord cutters, but it's not as fast. So there's more, it's just not as many as there used to be in terms of growth rate. The bigger one for Disney is ESPN. I think I keep my cable packages because of sports. So if ESPN has their own streaming services, then that's it for a lot of cord cutters.
Now, did they say anything about sports in the most recent announcement?
No, but I mean, ESPN is just going to be another streaming service. So ESPN, the channels, will just be a streaming service rather than a cable channel that a lot of cable companies have to pay for, and they pay through the nose for it because it's one of the most expensive channels that anyone can buy.
Yeah.
But moving on, I want to talk about James Cameron.
Oh yes, one of our favorite loudmouth directors.
Well, yes. So I was reading this article and he was talking about Alien Covenant, which we both agree wasn't a great film. Did you see it? You saw it, right?
I did. I saw it. Yeah, I was like, I think maybe you liked it a bit more than I did, but yeah, I'm kind of lukewarm on the whole new Alien stuff.
Yeah, I'm kind of lukewarm too. So this is the quote from James Cameron. He said, "I thought that Alien Covenant was a great ride. It was beautiful. I love Ridley's films and I love his filmmaking. I love the beauty of the photography. I love the visceral sense that you're there, that you're present. It's not a film that I would have made. I don't like films where you invest in a character and they get destroyed at the end." And I'm like, dude, you made Terminator films where all the Terminators die in the end. What are you talking about?
Yeah. I guess maybe he means the good guys, but yeah.
But it's in Terminator 2, Arnold dies. And freaking Michael Biehn dies. Kyle Reese dies in the first movie. Right? Yeah. So I'm like, what are you talking about, man? Like, this is stupid. And I hate films, not hate, but I think films where the good guys always live really have less emotional weight to them because we expect that to happen. It's like plot armor, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like in many lesser films, you get the sense that all of the or a lot of the conflict is manufactured, and that there's no real sense of peril. So, a lot of times endings can feel cheap because...
And it's not like the main character dies in Alien Covenant. She survives.
Yeah, but the implication is that the alien that he's planted in the ship is going to kill them the second it gets defrosted when they land on their new planet.
Right. Well, Michael Fassbender is going to colonize the entire planet with a bunch of new alien babies, right?
Right.
Yeah. But at the same time, this is such passive aggressiveness.
Yeah. It's like, to what extent
it's
is he...
oh, you did a great job, Ridley Scott, but there's just one huge point I have to make, and is that your story sucks.
Yeah, it's like, speaking as the guy who made the last really critically successful Aliens film, and you've only really made one.
And plus, what was your last project about? Avatar? I wonder how that's been received over the past 5 years.
Oh,
Not very good.
He would probably argue that it's still the most profitable film in the history of all time, but...
God, he's unbearable, man. He really is. If you go back and watch Titanic too, it's probably one of the most overrated Oscar winners ever.
Oh yeah. It's up there with
Shakespeare in Love,
or Out of Africa. They're movies that for one reason or another they captured the Academy's adoration at the time they came out
because they're long, winding, epic love stories. Which they love.
He's running his mouth now because I guess he's excited about doing press for the 3D conversion of Terminator 2 Judgment Day, which is hitting theaters the next little while.
Oh god.
So he's all...
Does he not know 3D's dead?
Well, no, because he I think in the same collection of interviews, he was talking about how the 3D re-release of Titanic made $200 million at the box office a couple of years ago. So he was like, woohoo, my film is still great and I can release it in 3D and make even more.
Oh my god. That's so
stupid. He was, And of course, he was already talking about if Judgment Day in 3D does well, then I'm going to do a post-conversion 3D job on Aliens. That'll be the next one.
Oh my god. This reeks of a guy who's run out of original ideas and is just trying to constantly dig up whatever he can just to make money.
And speaking of plot armor, that's actually a good way to segue into the next point about James Cameron from this past week. He announced that in the upcoming 4 Avatar sequels. I'll say that again, 4, because he's doing them all.
Oh god.
He's going to bring back the villain who was killed off at the end of the first Avatar in 2009, played by Stephen Lang, to be the villain over the course of the next 4 films. So, for a guy who likes to go in on other well-respected filmmakers for the way they end their films, it seems like he doesn't have a whole lot of consistency with his own movies.
Yeah, does he not see the problem here? No one's going to watch the first 3 because the villain's going to live.
Now, granted, it's the kind of quote that only people like us, who are watching the industry really closely are probably going to know about. So there's going to be millions of people who go to see the Avatar sequels who would have read none of the news leading up to it. And, they'll be like, oh, I guess he's the villain.
But I mean, you can probably find out after the first 2 new sequels, right?
Maybe, yeah.
I mean, you'd have to live under the rock to not realize that Stephen Lang is going to stick around. Especially since he's announced it, right? And you're going to know the official cast for all 4 films.
But assumedly, there'll probably be some secondary villains who will bite the dust in the intervening ones. But
I hope Avatar bombs so hard. We're not I hope James Cameron.
No. But
that his new projects don't do as well.
I am sort of with you in the sense that the man has been, he's claimed the title of King of the World in the movie industry for the past couple of years, or couple of decades.
Oh my. Self-proclaimed,
because his movies are so profitable. But I kind of want him to be humbled a little bit because this, he's making this sprawling epic out of a story that people didn't really care about when it came out. It was kind of riding the first wave of the rebooted 3D experience. And granted, the 3D and the visuals looked pretty good at the time.
Pretty good. Yes, that was the key word. Pretty good. Not great.
Pretty good, but nobody was raving about the story. It got no real critical notices. So I don't know if it's going to pan out for him.
Zoe Saldana hasn't become a huge hit movie star, and definitely not Sam Worthington.
Yeah, and the movie's riding on them, and Sigourney Weaver will be in there, so I guess that's okay. She's coming back from the dead too. It's You know, apparently in the Avatar world, nothing ever dies, including ideas.
Bad ideas, yes. Speaking about people in the industry and interesting comments, there is a Entertainment Weekly article about Ben Affleck and Justice League. And they asked him how he kind of found working with Zack Snyder and Joss Whedon. Of course, we know that Snyder had to leave the project midway through because his daughter had died and Joss Whedon had to step in. And the word is that they've changed the movie, the tone of the movie at least, quite a bit. And so this is the Ben Affleck quote. "It's a little bit unorthodox. Zack had a family tragedy and stepped off, which was horrible. For the movie, the best person we could have possibly found was Joss. We got really lucky that he stepped in. Justice League is an interesting product of two directors, both with kind of unique visions, both with really strong takes. I've never had that experience before making a movie. I have to say, I really love working with Zack, and I really love the stuff we've done with Joss." Now, does that not read like just massive PR stuff?
Yeah, it sounds like a guy trying to get out ahead of the story, and
It sounds like a guy who's like, I don't know about him, and I don't know about him either, but it's interesting. For lack of a better word, it's interesting.
Yeah, and maybe the second most telling part is the fact that, you know, he's never worked on a project with that kind of mix before. Because, you know, Ben Affleck...
Well, a few people have, yeah.
Well, I know, and Ben Affleck's been in the business for a long time, so you would think that, you know, he's probably found himself in a situation with reshoots before. And if this particular round of reshoots is striking him as feeling different, then that kind of raises an eyebrow as well.
Yeah, he makes a point of saying they both have really strong takes. But the other word from the industry was that, like, Joss Whedon's kind of fingerprints on the movie won't be as prominent as we think. They've obviously changed the characterization of Cyborg.
Yeah, apparently to make him more funny.
So if there's like any one-liners in there, we know that's Joss Whedon. But anytime an actor comes out and says, you know, this is an interesting film, you know, they have unique visions and an interesting product, then I'm kind of like wary of how it's going to turn out.
Yeah, well, I mean, for my money, there's few things more distracting in a movie when you can very clearly tell the like a clashing voice in the movie. Like, it happens, I would say it happens more often when you've got like a big Transformers type movie that has like 5 screenwriters and was the product of a writing room, where like you can just tell that sections have been dropped over a period of multiple rewrites, and important details that you need to kind of get a through line through the story are just missing. And you can't understand the plot.
And on the other hand, we kind of talked about this in the last episode, was that Homecoming worked out really well, even though they had multiple screenwriters.
Yeah, so it's not like a death sentence.
No, it's not. But I mean, considering Zack Snyder's track record and DC's track record, and even Joss Whedon's track record, because I didn't enjoy Age of Ultron all that much, it is a little concerning. Not that anyone had high hopes for it, but I'm still intrigued by the whole Justice League movie.
It's hard to make any real accurate predictions at this point. I guess maybe a new trailer might show off some of the new Cyborg material.
Is it that hard to make a prediction though? I think we know what we're gonna get.
Yeah, I kind of don't want to. I don't want to. I don't want to admit it at this point. I'm so tired of like all the disappointment that these movies.
You want to give it a chance?
Yeah, I want to give everything a chance, but I have been burned twice pretty hard by this franchise. So
twice? Which two?
Well, between Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad.
Oh right, Suicide Squad.
Right.
Isn't that getting a sequel?
Oh yeah, because it made a bunch of money. It was a really profitable movie. There was never any question there.
Yes, the bottom line. It's all they care about.
It made like almost 700 mil.
Yeah, that's another movie that could have really benefited from better trailers and marketing. Or actually, you know what? They benefited too much from good trailers and marketing. And
yeah, because ended up being, you know, the movie was re-edited by a trailer house.
Yeah, and it ended up being nothing like what was promised.
David Ayer's like voice as a director was totally stripped out in favor of trying to make something that was kind of slap happy and kind of, you know, all over the place like a trailer is, because that's what happens when you hire trailer editors to edit a feature film.
I think the most telling aspect of Suicide Squad was I think we had 2 separate introductions to Will Smith's character.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What the hell's going on? And there were a couple ones that were missing introductions as well. And you clearly knew which ones were obviously expendable, which ones weren't.
Yeah, and knowing that, like, you can almost see how that will start to play into this Justice League thing, because too many voices, they just start clashing with each other, and you end up missing things or repeating things without noticing it.
Well, the hope is that they learn from their mistakes, right?
I mean, you could say that they did learn from their mistakes with Wonder Woman. You know, it was clear that they in some way, the bigger bosses at DC, you know, they didn't come in and say, "Oh, we're gonna totally reshape this and take it away from Patty Jenkins and make it not her movie anymore." So they, you know, to their credit, they didn't do that. And I would say that Wonder Woman is more successful as a movie because it feels more cohesive and more of like a single person's voice.
Well, it's a very much a standalone. Like, I don't get a lot of dark Zack Snyder DC vibes from Wonder Woman, right? It almost really exists in its own universe, which really helped bring out the character, right?
Actually, I read something interesting about, it was a retrospective on 300 that AV Club ran with yesterday or the day before. And they were pushing their point a little bit far, but essentially they were saying that 300 was kind of like a love letter to fascism.
What a fitting topic.
Well, yeah, especially in light of everything that happened in Charlottesville over the weekend. The writer was kind of saying that because of its like uber macho, totalitarian ideas, you know, but also like the fact that it's all about like a small group of white guys fighting off a million-strong army of Persians. It works on a story level as kind of like the perfect little rah piece to rile up people who share those views. And that somehow, you know, and then in the comments section down below the article, people were kind of looking at Zack Snyder as a filmmaker, and they were like, well, you know, I mean, he has expressed an interest in like pretty conservative views in the past. Like he claims that he wants to make an adaptation of Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead as a passion project. So, you know, it seems like he's more right.
And Superman as white Jesus.
Yeah, so he's more on the right side of the spectrum than I think maybe many people really appreciate. So this kind of, what we're getting from the DC universe is being dark and oppressive, and then there's this crew of like, this small crew of people who are righting the wrongs of the entire world in a way that we don't really get in Marvel. In Marvel, it feels like it's a broader group of people that are banding together, or more diverse, maybe. I don't know. So there's very, very different kind of ideologies there.
Yeah. Well, 2 things just to defend Zack Snyder. One is that 300 is basically like a shot-by-shot remake of the comic. So True. It's not his original idea.
Yeah, and that's a fair point, with Frank Miller's voice being the kind of driving inspiration.
Yeah, yeah, and we know what Frank Miller's like with his comics. He's a pretty dark, messed up dude. Yeah. And the other thing is, too, like, it's at least based on historical fact. Like, obviously, racism back then is not what racism is today, and what is acceptable then is not acceptable now. So I think if you view it from that sort of historical lens, you could say that we've moved past that, which is a great thing.
Oh yeah, and I'm certainly not here to make the argument that Zack Snyder is a secret fascist filmmaker.
No, of course
sneaking
not, no.
weird messages into his movies, but you know, there's some linking kind of material there.
Yeah, that's true. My biggest gripe about multiculturalism and like inclusivity is like, or inclusiveness, his point is like people want to have like multiracial casts just to prove that they're all like, you know,
woke.
Yeah, they're all woke. But just because you cast someone of color, be it Asian, Black, Hispanic, whatever, it doesn't mean you're not, you know, racist. It also just means you're kind of pandering sometimes.
Yeah, you have to be really careful in the way they're presented. Like you look at Sulu in the third Star Trek film. You know, that yes. you can make a pretty strong argument that they were like, oh, let's put an insert shot of him meeting up with his partner, his male partner, when they return to that space station. And because you don't see anything other than that, it's so one note that you're like, oh, I don't really believe that they believe in this character decision.
And like, just because George Takei is gay doesn't mean Sulu's gay.
Yeah, and George Takei kind of made that point. He was like,
yeah,
you know, he was kind of annoyed by it that they were being so surface level with it.
Yeah, so like, I mean, applaud Hollywood for, I guess, moving in the right direction, but don't give yourself a medal because you start casting more black people.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Fuck off with that shit, Like, I hope to God that's not why Moonlight won, right?
Yeah, it's always hard when you're trying to...
Because it's got tainted with that sort of history of the Academy being super white and super old, right?
Yeah. I mean, but you can look back to 2013 when they gave out quite a few awards to 12 Years a Slave.
Yes.
So
and that was a great film.
That is a very that's a very different type of movie. Granted, it's more directly about slavery, but trying to parse out why the Academy does anything, I think, is one of the hardest games in this business.
Hey, that's a good segue. Speaking of games, Game of Thrones.
Yes, game.
Have you been keeping up?
I have been keeping up. I watched it last night at the home of a mutual acquaintance of ours. He's got a big fancy screen that he projects the episodes on, and
I gotta say though, what a very placeholder episode.
It was. Yeah, we were saying that too when the credits rolled. We were like, especially since it was called Eastwatch, and there's been a lot of people saying like, oh, there's going to be a big showdown at Eastwatch, and there were people offering like odds on whether or not Tormund was going to bite it at Eastwatch when it gets overrun by the dead. But none of that happened. It was kind of like it was all set up for like the final two.
The episode called Eastwatch sets you up for Eastwatch. There was a lot of stuff that happened in the episode.
Yeah, like we have to get into how your prophecy kind of came true. Not in a direct way, but in a more like almost like a throwaway line thing. Yeah.
There's still a chance though. For those who don't know, there's a scene between Sam and Gilly, and Sam had been just shot down by the Maesters because he's going on about how the White Walkers are real and Bran Stark is obviously telling the truth, and the Citadel doesn't believe it because they're in this ivory tower and they don't believe anything that's going to come harm them. So Gilly's reading this book and she mentions this story about a Rhaegar Targaryen having his marriage annulled and taking another woman in marriage in Dorne.
In a secret ceremony.
And the implication is that the woman that he married in secret is Lyanna Stark, who is Jon Snow's mother.
Yeah.
And so that legitimizes Jon Snow as a Targaryen, which puts him in front of Daenerys in the line of succession for the throne, which is another wrinkle into this. And like in that episode, we kind of got the seeds were kind of planted for a Jon and Daenerys romance. So we're going to have more Targaryen incest.
Because she did seem pretty impressed that Drogon came right up to him and like wanted to be petted by him.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's going to be interesting. Although I think it'd be really out of Jon's character to want to be the king of Westeros.
Yeah, it may sow some different types of seeds, if not for a romance, then maybe for a more detailed rivalry between the two of them. Because if Daenerys finds out about who his parents are, and she may begin to like doubt him even more than she already does, because she may suspect that he's secretly known about this the whole time and is trying to usurp her position or something.
Right. But I mean, I think they're going to sleep together and commit some incest. I mean, it's just part of the show.
Yeah.
And I also think that there's a good chance that Jon Snow dies by the end of the series. He makes some sort of ultimate sacrifice, so she becomes queen because he dies.
Yeah, that's not
because he talks about how he died the first time, and if he dies the second time, he doesn't want to be brought back to life.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that might play into it, and we know that Melisandre is gonna come back at some point, or so she says.
Yeah, and then she's got something else that she needs to do before she dies.
Right. Yeah, and I think Littlefinger's gonna get it. He's gonna get killed somehow.
I think if there's any deaths of like primary characters in the next couple of episodes, Littlefinger's definitely on that list.
And some of the guys who go along to their stupid mission past the wall, that some of them are gonna. I think Thoros and Beric are probably gonna die.
I would say Thoros before Beric.
Probably.
Yeah, but not the Hound. The Hound's probably gonna.
No, we still need Clegane Bold. We need to see the Hound fight the Mountain.
That's got to happen. Oh well, there's Gendry now too. Gendry's back,
and I love how he like has a sledgehammer, just like Baratheon, just like his dad.
They gave Sir Davis Seaworth the most internet comments referencing line ever.
And just how the show memes itself.
Yeah, it was like, because he says like, oh, I thought you'd still be rowing. And and I was like, oh.
Might as well looked at the camera right then and there. What do you think of the season so far, though? I don't think it's the best season, though, you know? Like, we have 2 more episodes to go, but it's not the best.
We were talking about this after the episode aired last night, and so there's stuff at King's Landing that just isn't connecting, probably because they're not giving Cersei Lannister very much to do at all. Like, she's gone from being a person that people actively hate to just being someone whose fate is kind of pretty much sealed at this point, but she doesn't really accept it. And she just kind of like, I'm going to win anyways. You know, that's basically...
Well, she's going to go out swinging, so there's some, like, honor in that. I think Jaime's going to kill her.
That would be the most, like, poetic justice kind of moment. But until that happens, like, until we actually get to the run-up to that scene, I feel like a lot of her scenes are just kind of their plot delivery things. They're like, all right, what does Cersei think about this newest thing that Daenerys has done? All right, what does Cersei think about what Jaime just did?
Yeah, it's kind of like how Bran sends out a raven or sees the Night's King start marching toward Eastwatch, and then the next scene, the people in the Citadel know about it, and you're like, what? Wow, that was fast.
Yeah, so they're kind of skipping all over the place to kind of make things happen on time.
I think it's because last season, season 6, they were probably like, you know, like George R.R. Martin's probably going to finish his book soon, The Winds of Winter, you know, maybe we can drag this out a little and give him a little more time to finish the book. But then when he came out and said, you know what, I can't finish the book, they said, all right, you know what, we need to get on our horse and move on.
Yeah, they've got TV to make, and they also need to start getting into the development for all of like the spin-offs that are obviously going to come once season 8 is
Have those been
up.
announced?
They haven't been. They've been officially announced, but like, I mean, come on, it's HBO. They're just like Disney. We were talking about before. They're a major media company. They need revenue. They're looking around. They're like, oh well, what makes sense to do here? People love Game of Thrones, but we're ending the first official series, so let's do some like, you know, prequel ones.
But that's the thing with HBO. I never felt like they were into the
like prequels and spin-offs.
Yeah, spin-off game, because they've had tons of stuff. I mean, The Sopranos and The Wire didn't have any spin-offs.
No, but they're bringing back Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Right. That's a comedy sketch show, though. Well, not sketch show, but it's kind of like a...
But I think they would be crazy to kind of ignore that there's an appetite in the audience out there for that kind of stuff. Like, they're seeing what AMC is doing with Better Call Saul. Then they look over to Showtime, who's doing pretty well with like new digital subscribers for Twin Peaks.
Yeah. I mean, there's a good argument to do it. I just don't know if HBO is willing to do it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I guess time will tell. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if they kind of break from the tradition a little bit and start doing projects like that.
Right. And it's so expensive to do this stuff, right? So Cersei's gonna die, I think, early next season, because I can't see her dragging on as like the third plot wheel between the White Walkers and the Free Folk. Like, the next season has to be mostly about them versus the Night's King.
Yeah.
And they got a bunch of other storylines they got to wrap up too.
Just based on what I was reading about some of the stuff that they've already tossed out from roughly this point in the narrative, like apparently there was this whole thing in the books about Euron Greyjoy being 1,000 times more evil than he is in the show.
Yeah, he's a lot more demented.
And he's got like demonic powers, that he makes a deal with the Night King himself and all this stuff.
I think the guy who plays Euron has done a great job, but they haven't done really any real justice to that character. He just kind of rolls in with his ships and be like, "Hey, I'm Euron," because when he was introduced, he just kind of shows up on a bridge.
Yeah.
And I wish they had teased him a little bit more, because I think beforehand they must have known that he was going to come into play. And now all of a sudden he's not part of the plot anymore. Like, he didn't get a single mention or a single scene in last night's episode. So like, what role does he play in all of this? Like, I don't quite understand what they plan on doing with him. Like, is he just in to be like a caricature? Because I mean, he could pull off a Joker if he really wanted to. It's
kind of connected to what you were just saying about Cersei being the sort of third wheel in the overarching plot, because he's so bound up in her story. Until her story is more definitively resolved, I don't think they can do much with him, because he, you know, right now he's just kind of waiting around for her to win the war so he can marry her and, you know, get a bunch of land or something, whatever his end goal is.
Yeah, and what about Grey Worm? Like, what's up with him? Is he still chilling at Casterly Rock?
Assumedly, yeah.
So they just kind of like abandon things. I know they don't have the time for it, but we have had short episodes, and reportedly the rumor is that next season's episodes could be as long as like 90 minutes or maybe 2 hours.
Yeah.
Like the finale is going to be long for sure.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's going to be at least like, it's going to be like a feature-length TV movie. And the one thing too is like the dragon CGI looks great, but I thought the ravens looked awful. Did you ever notice that?
Maybe they were like, oh, people know what ravens look like. We can cut corners a little bit.
The brand's Raven Murder of Crows looks terrible.
It was kind of like it was only a few upgrades on what we got in like Lord of the Rings or something.
But I'm excited to see what happens next, because traditionally the second to last episode is always like the big battle.
Yes, yeah.
And so the final episode's going to obviously have a cliffhanger as well. I think Cersei being pregnant again is going to be an important plot point as well, between her and Jaime at least.
Big time, yeah. Apparently there's like a prophecy she would only ever have 3 children and they would all die. So
yeah,
it kind of suggests that something's going to happen there before that child is ever born, you know?
Yeah.
One final kind of humiliation or defeat for her before she finally gets her comeuppance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think we're going to have at least one flashback scene back to the stuff I talked about in one of the previous episodes about the Night in the Laughing Tree, because we got to talk about how Rhaegar and Lyanna met and fell in love, because we now know that he didn't rape her.
Yeah, exactly. And that would probably make sense to do like maybe around the same time that Daenerys finds out who Jon is.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see how they actually do it. But I'm kind of glad that everything's coming together. I think it was really cool to see all the 7 characters come together and form like a northern ranging party. It has a lot of like a very 7 Samurai feel to it.
Yeah. Or like A-Team kind of.
Yeah, someone's talking about how it's like the Westeros' Avengers. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of true.
Yeah.
I'm excited, but overall, I still think maybe some of the first few seasons were still some of the best.
Yeah, now it has more of a sense of like being almost like a jigsaw puzzle where you've got 90% of it done, and the final few pieces are so much easier to place because you've eliminated all of the other possibilities. So I feel like some of the scenes we're getting now where like characters are meeting for the first time after years and years of them being apart, you know, you get that kind of visceral kind of like, yeah, when they finally meet up and they have a line together.
Yeah, it's the payoff.
You get a lot of these payoff moments, which you know, tends to happen in TV shows of this length. But I think we're going to keep getting a lot of those, and it's going to feel good in the moment. But as a season of TV, maybe it won't be quite as dramatic as it could be when people are like more conflicted.
No, I mean, it's made a name for itself by killing off important characters, but we're at the point where, I mean, you really can't kill anyone off because the story still needs to make sense.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the main character, the one that's gonna die, is still Jon Snow. Hence the name, A Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah.
People in Westeros are gonna sing songs about Jon Snow,
and that means I'll still get a little bit of geek cred for sharing his last name and his first name actually.
Well, you are one of his. Well, no, it's Rob, Rob with 2 B's.
What? No,
Rob Stark.
Rob Stark, but my first name is John.
No, your first name's Rob.
Okay.
Your last name's Snow.
Yes.
So you share the last name.
Yes, but my real first name is John.
Oh, right. I forgot about that.
Yes. So I'm John Robert Snow, but people call me Rob or Robert.
Interesting tidbit about Rob, by the way. Is it spelled Jon?
Yes, so it doesn't spelled exactly the same way, but nevertheless, people who like have to look at my driver's license or like my passport when I'm going through an airport or something, I get a comment about it like literally once a week. People don't even like, I guess the last name Snow isn't common enough in North America for people to really think that it's a real name in real life.
Now you just got to get a man bun and look perpetually depressed.
I can't grow a man bun because I have curly hair, so it would.
Well, he's kind of got like wavy curly hair.
No,
you can
but
still tie it up.
But see, his hair has still got that kind of dreamier, kind of like long locks thing. Mine would just turn into ringlets if I grew it that long, and I would
just get a hair straightener.
All right, this is committing a whole lot to this look. I don't know if I can keep it up.
Sure, you can. Speaking of commitment, Hayao Miyazaki is unretiring, unsurprisingly.
Yeah. It seems like he gets a new idea for something he has to make every couple of years now, and the poor Studio Ghibli's got to fire up production again.
Yeah, did you hear about his newest production, though, called BORO the Caterpillar?
No, what's it about?
Well, it's about a caterpillar, I would assume. And it has
Okay,
something
yeah,
to
but,
do
like,
about
what's the-
nature, because he always has something to do about like nature and environmentalism. But
Right.
I think the important thing is apparently it's going to be a CGI movie. And this is coming from a guy who like detests CGI.
Okay.
So I don't know what's up with him. I don't know why he flip-flops so much. I don't know why he can't make up his mind. But I am looking forward to what he does.
Yeah. Some of the confusion, I think, over his employment status, as it were, sometimes comes from like poorly translated interviews. So sometimes I think he'll say like, oh, I don't know if I'll make another movie. And then that's reported as being like, Hayao Miyazaki retires, Studio Ghibli shuts down.
Well, I mean, if you don't make another movie and you're a director, aren't you essentially retired?
Until you decide that you want to make another one again.
Well, I guess. I mean, plenty of people have like unretired.
Yeah, but it seems like he's done it a number of times now.
Yeah, this is like a running theme with Miyazaki. I think he's just someone who's like really hard to work for. And so he's one of those like mercurial artistic geniuses that really like is unpredictable in that sense.
Yeah. So where do you think his decision to work in CG has come from? Like, is he thinking it might be easier to do because it'll be all digital, or?
It's definitely easier than having everything hand drawn. It's so much faster. It's not necessarily easier, but the skill set you use is totally different, right?
Yeah.
But I'm just curious about how he's going to use the CGI and what exactly changed his mind. Because I mean, CGI movies have been really successful for like the past 10 years now.
Yeah. I wonder if it'll end up looking a little bit like that last Studio Ghibli co-production, the one that made it to the Oscars.
Oh, The Red Turtle?
I think that was still partially computer generated. But it was done in a style that kind of looked like hand-drawn animation.
Well, it's kind of like the Lego movies, right? It's supposed to look like stop motion, but it's all CGI. Use different timing techniques to make it look like stop motion. So maybe he's starting to turn around and gotten with the times. I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be a couple years before it comes out anyway.
Yeah, given the production timelines for these kinds of things. But talking about Miyazaki coming out of retirement is kind of a good way to jump into the last thing we're talking about today, which is Steven Soderbergh coming back to do Logan Lucky.
Yes.
Which is his return to narrative feature filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to come out on August 18th, which is probably right around when this episode's going to launch as well. And it's a heist movie set in the South at a NASCAR race, like a major NASCAR event.
What an odd premise, eh?
Yeah. Well, it's got Channing Tatum and Adam Driver as two kind of down on their luck brothers who decide to pull off this heist and steal some of the cash that's being collected in a room at the Speedway.
Both underrated comedians.
Exactly. And then they get Daniel Craig, who's coming in and playing this absolutely gonzo type of character with like bleach blonde hair and this kind of high-pitched voice, and they break him out of prison to help with some of the demolition side of things. What looks like a very classic kind of Soderbergh hijinks ensue as they try to pull off this heist. If you've seen like any of the Ocean's movies, or certainly like The Informant, any of his movies that combine a bit of like of crime intrigue with comedy, that's probably what we're getting here. So I'm pretty excited for it. And it's kind of cool to see him come back and do a movie like this after essentially saying like 4 or 5 years ago that he was done with feature films entirely. He thought the business model of feature films was being killed by big blockbuster tentpoles, and he was going to go work in TV because that's what all the cool kids are doing.
Well, he's not exactly wrong, right? Because I think TV has become like a real attractive medium for a lot of directors.
Sure. Yeah.
But we definitely are living in the superhero blockbuster age.
Yeah, but I mean, like, people were maybe a little bit premature in saying that independent cinema was dying. People love to say that such and such a thing is dying when it comes to arts and culture.
Yeah, people are just like overly dramatic.
So I don't think that the situation was as dire as like prompting Soderbergh to like just quit entirely.
Well, friggin' 4 years ago, they kept telling us print is dying. Print isn't dying, it just moved on the internet. That's all it has.
But one of the cool things about Logan Lucky is the way Soderbergh actually went about the final distribution and marketing of the movie, because I think he looked at the the way that independent films had been distributed and marketed in the past. And this might have been part of what was inspiring him becoming fed up with the business model. So essentially, he looked at the way typical independent movies of this budget would get distributed and marketed. And for a typical movie like Logan Lucky, which cost about $30 million, a director would approach a major studio like Warner Brothers. And they would say to Warner Brothers, all right, we know that you have a established reputation with theater exhibition companies, and you'll be able to use your relationship to kind of get our little movie into as many theaters as possible. And to do that, a big studio like Warner Brothers will say, all right, we'll foot the $40 million or whatever it's going to take to get your little movie marketed and out into all of these places in front of all these people. But in return, we're going to retain creative control over the marketing campaign, everything from the cut of the trailer to the design of the posters to the bus ads. And we're also going to take 15% of all the box office. So I think Soderbergh looked at this kind of model that had existed for a long time, and he thought to himself, and I think he's quoted in the story from the New York Times saying, "You're too far away from your money." Which is kind of a fair assessment, because if you're a little movie trying to bring in as much cash as you can to finance future projects, if you're giving 15% of that stuff away, if you're a large corporation, you can kind of stand to take that loss. But a smaller company, it's going to be harder to make a profit.
Yeah, it's going to put more pressure on them to make a profit. But the idea is if you make a lot of money, 15% isn't all that much. So it's a gamble.
It's a gamble, yeah. It's always been a gamble. But I think for indie films, it's still only a small percentage of them that are able to kind of be like the My Big Fat Greek Wedding anymore. Movies that are made for such low budgets, but then go on to make hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, those are still pretty rare. So
what's Logan Lucky's budget?
I think it's about 30 mil.
30 mil? How much do you think it's going to make or gross?
I mean, that's the thing, because what Soderbergh is doing is he went to a much smaller marketing company, Bleecker Street, which has like 15 people on its staff, and he said to them, all right, you're going to handle the marketing. We're not going to spend nearly as much as what Warner Brothers would spend, nothing like 40 million, and we're just going to do like one trailer, maybe two. We're not going to make like 10 TV spots, like 10 different versions of 30-second cuts of the trailer, blast those up everywhere. And we're not going to do nearly as many like posters or billboards. And Soderbergh held on to full creative control and was able to make the trailer that he wanted without worrying like whether the studio was going to put too many of the jokes or too many of the plot points in. So he was able to sell the movie the way he wanted to. And, if it works, he could double his money. He could make 60 mil domestically, and he might be able to rake in a couple tens of millions of dollars more from some of the English-speaking international markets, like here in Canada, the UK, Australia. You'd probably have a harder time in some of the markets like China or India, which tend to respond better to like the big blockbuster stuff. But yeah, if it works, it could kind of change the game a bit for the way indie films are marketed. So that's kind of exciting.
Yeah, definitely. I think the one thing to take note too is that Daniel Craig seems to be enjoying filming this movie a lot more.
Yes. He plays like, for anybody who hasn't seen it, well, here's a clip of the trailer, first of all.
Let's blow this thing.
You thought I was gonna use dynamite?
I kinda did.
We are dealing with science here.
Run!
Now get back here. So no bacon. I said no bacon.
And as you can hear in that, Daniel Craig is doing this like voice and this character that is probably, I think most people would say it's kind of against type. It's very much not the James Bond kind of thing.
Yeah, totally.
So that alone was a draw.
Well, we all know he does the Bond movies for money.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's definitely not a...
This is a chance for him to play like a real character. Like a real quirky character. This is a type of character that I could see Matt Damon taking on, and it's just extra funny that it's Daniel Craig instead.
Yeah. Because, Daniel Craig, unlike Matt Damon's been working with Soderbergh for years now and has been able to do a lot more comedic stuff, stuff like The Informant or...
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
Even his character Linus in the Ocean's movie is kind of a comic relief character. But Daniel Craig hasn't really been able to do that. Like, ever since he's been cast as Bond, those movies require so much of him that he's been lucky if he's been able to do like a small film in between or maybe some stage work. So yeah, I think I'm kind of excited to see him enjoying himself again. That's going to be fun.
And Soderbergh's like really good with these heist genre too.
Yeah,
right?
he's kind of good at keeping it snappy. He doesn't make it overcomplicated. Here's to more Steven Soderbergh making feature films.
Here's to more actors acting against type.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's always a fun time. But I think that wraps it up, Rob.
Yeah, that about does it for this episode. So head on over to kinetoscope.ca if you want to catch up on what we've been writing about in more detail. We recently put up a review of The Dark Tower, which opened about a week and a half ago. And there'll be more reviews coming out, including one for Logan Lucky when it opens in the next couple of days. So keep an eye out for that. And from Toronto, my name is Robert Snow.
And from Vancouver, I'm Jason Chen. Thanks for listening. Be sure to check out our website at kinetoscope.ca, and we'll talk to you next time.